Welcome everybody to Sofar in Session. My name is Billy Walsh, and I'm the Artist Community Manager for Sofar, joined today by a panelist, three individuals that really excited to have here on the show this afternoon. So wanted to just give a brief introduction. This in session will be focused on building and maintaining a local fan base, which is why I know everybody here is attending today. Really excited because this actually ties into a special event here at Sofar that we've been working through. It aligns with what we're calling our Heart of the City campaign. So for many of us musicians have really been part of that creative culture that inspires us and the beating heart of any city that we're either visiting or call home. They're bringing joy, shaping communities, and now more than ever, artists are helping us to connect, to create shared experiences and understanding online, because we have to pause shows until it's safe to do so. Being summertime, we might be used to a crowded beach or a breezy rooftop show with Sofar, planning our next weekend getaway. There's a lot of wonderful memories that we might be missing out on or feeling like we're missing out on this summer. But we're trying to turn that around and see a little bit more about how we might still make the most of this year. And that's where the Heart of the City campaign really comes into play here. Throughout August and into September, we're aiming to share stories and experiences through the eyes of Sofar's artist community, including these three panelists that are joining me today. Just to really highlight global performances, we'll do some artist takeovers. And of course, this particular in session is a part of the magic. So we're gonna have a lot of fun today. I'm really thrilled to be joined by our three guests. I'd like to introduce them one by one. So first, we have Tamika Ponce. She's a Michigan native, now living in Chicago, but currently tuning in from Mexico. And she owns and operates her own creative management agency called the Boys Club. So as a manager and a consultant, Tamika has a hand in nearly every aspect of the artist's careers, pushing them to believe in themselves and exceed expectations. Welcome, Tamika. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Next, we have Rising Over Envy, or R.O.E, as he might like to be called, with his hometown of Chicago on his back and the sounds of soul in his roots. R.O.E blends an urban vibe with poetic lyricism and music that hits straight to the heart and will attract anyone with an affection for alternative hip hop. I've had a chance to talk to R.O.E a few times and really excited to have him here. Welcome, R.O.E.
Yo, thanks for having me. It feels good to be here.
Hell yeah. And last but not least, we have Carey with a background in artist management, radio promotion, and consulting for labels and artists. Ryan recently launched a new venture, Bedrock Music Entertainment, and love having you here today, Ryan. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Excited to dig into some stuff here.
Cool. So we've received a ton of really great content from everybody who has submitted the form ahead of time. We know everything about what our artists tuning in today want to know about in terms of content and questions, and we'll be covering off on several topics related to developing a local fan base for the first 45 minutes. We'll also leave some room for Q&A at the end. So in addition to the chat functionality, all of our attendees should be able to see the Q&A function as well. Feel free to submit a question at any time. We'll have our moderators who are active in the chat going through and making sure that we moderate questions. So if anything does get covered during the 45-minute conversation, we can go ahead and nix those out because they may have already been answered. But otherwise, we'll make sure to get to as many questions as we can at the end. Just a few things to keep in mind before we kick things off. This is a supportive and uplifting space, so we want to make sure that we keep that in mind as the discussion carries over. And yeah, feel free to use those chat and Q&A functionalities. We want you to feel as active as you can, even though we are online and limited to that face-to-face genuine interactions that we know we're all used to normally. So feel free to just remain active and engage during the conversation. And afterwards, we will be sending out a short survey just to hear a little bit more about what you took away, what we can do better. Your feedback really matters to us. So if you could fill out that survey at the end, that'd be really great. But without further ado, all boring housekeeping rules aside, I just want to dive right in and begin the conversation with you all. So just because my screen is showing Tamika, R.O.E, and Ryan, I'm going to start with Tamika and ask this question, but I'd love everybody to chime in and just give a brief introduction here for a bit more context on our panelists today. Tamika, can you start us off by sharing a little bit of the short version of how you got started in the music industry and what your goals are now in regards to helping the artists that you manage to grow?
Yeah, so I've just always kind of been around music. When I moved to Chicago to go to college. I was a party promoter, so I was throwing college parties and stuff like that with just my friends, always around it. All my friends are like producers and artists. I was doing, events. I started doing stuff in the event space, doing events for like Lollapalooza, the Grammys, Coachella, stuff like that. I got introduced to my now artist, and I didn't want to manage at all. So I kept telling him no. I kept turning him down. A year and a half in, after working together, we had a really, really good synergy. It was great. And so I eventually gave in, agreed to manage, and left my old company and started my agency. So yeah, and to help, I mean, my goal is to help him and to help my other artists as well. First, helping myself, making sure I'm a student of the game and I'm always learning, and just to see, how we can always expand. I think as a manager, your goal is always to help your artists grow in kind of every avenue. You become their everything, their parent, their friend, their therapist, everything. So, I mean, as long as they grow, I grow. So the team goal is to grow together. In short, I guess.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, hey, I mean, guess to piggyback on that, I too grew up around music, music lovers, creators, writers, singers, my family. So I've been around music for a long period of time. Although my initial passion was more into poetry and creative writing and things of that nature. And as I got older, fell in love with hip hop. Was already doing some creative stuff with rhyming and decided why not marry the two. When I met some friends in high school that were actively pursuing it and wanted to become rappers, and I just joined in with them, and it kind of just took off from there. Fell in love with a lot of underground hip hop that I wasn't familiar with, and then as I got better at my craft, I wanted to understand how does this make money, essentially, because I'm like, I want to move into the business side. So I was like, all right, how do I learn about the business? And that's another thing that kind of helped excel just my love and knowledge for music and music business. So I married the creative and business aspects and spent a lot of time self-managing before I moved on to get a team, self-booking. So I've pretty much worn every hat from that perspective of team aspect when it comes to an artist. So yeah, that's kind of where I got started. It started from love to building out like that ultimate passion, and then understanding the business, and then marrying those together. And now I'm at a space where I recently just relocated from New York to LA. And my goal now is just to figure out how to create sort of a new path. And after we talked earlier about this new normal and what that looks like. So I'm in a space where I'm figuring it out, but also still I'm releasing a new album soon. So just going through that whole process too. But right now it's a lot of just figuring out how to continue to get better as an artist.
Thanks, bro. Yeah, my name is Ryan Carey. I'm originally from Chicago, but I live in Nashville now. So I grew up playing music, and in high school, jumping from band to band, as most high school musicians do. And I moved into curating like coffee houses and open mic events. So I was involved in a lot of, kind of independent artist initiatives as a young musician. And when I went off to college, I didn't pay as much attention to that area of my life. And so post-college, when I was back in Chicago, I wanted to figure out a way to reconnect with it. And it made most sense to go into the business side of it rather than the performance side. While I enjoyed being in bands, I knew it was definitely not something that I was excelling at. So I joined a company, Jeff McCluskey & Associates, which is a long-standing radio promotion firm. And I worked there for 10 plus years before starting out on my own recently with my company, Bedrock. In my time there, I was in Chicago for a number of years, moved here in Nashville about 3 or 4 years ago. And the big goal there was to transition from major label radio promotion work and do something that was a bit more artist oriented. I wanted to be more near and dear to the artist process. And that's what led me into consulting and management. And moving from Chicago was, it was a daunting task, because in the city like that, you have, every show known to man comes by there. And touring in Nashville is a whole different animal. There's a lot more industry based here than there was in Chicago, but the touring side of things, it was wildly different. And it's something that definitely shaped or changed the way I viewed the touring industry and how artists approach different markets at different stages of their career. And we can get into that more later in this discussion. But yeah, so after I moved to Nashville, a bit more artist oriented, hands-on work with artists directly rather than being, a tertiary part of their plan that a label or management company would hire out for. And so that's where I've continued to transition towards. It's just being hands-on with artists. And as R.O.E mentioned, we were talking about what the new normal is, and it's something that's constantly evolving. And there's, I'm sure we'll each be sharing some of our revelations of what this change in economic direction for the business is over the next hour or so.
Definitely. We had a lot of folks submitting questions around what we're doing right now, during this weird time in our lives as musicians or being a part of the music industry. And we'll absolutely get into that before we get to the live Q&A even. But I wanted to kick it off. R.O.E, I'm going to point this one at you, and then everybody feel free to chime in. But just start off with R.O.E, just given you just mentioned you had picked up from Chicago and moved to LA, or New York to LA, you said, right?
Yeah. So went Chicago, New York, LA.
Nice. Awesome. So this is all about the geographic location and how that can make a difference for how you're building your fan base. Obviously, New York, LA, Chicago, a lot more populated than Boise, Idaho, for example. But nonetheless, still a lot of great artists coming out of all locations you could really think of. And a lot of these artists have found a way to blow up locally wherever they find themselves and expand from there. So starting with R.O.E and then getting into the rest of our panelists here, what are some of the basic rules of advice you would give to those just starting to build a fan base in their hometown or their local city before they even pick up and move somewhere new?
Man, that's a great question. And I think the dope part about this panel is all three of us have some connection to Chicago. And it's a part of our foundation. So I'm sure we're going to have a lot of parallels to what we say. But the biggest thing as an artist for me was to build with my local community and figuring out who are the other artists that are also looking to take that next step in my city, in Chicago. And at that time when I started, this is when shows were, at that time, it's 2009. So blogs were pretty big then. Showcases were a thing. So it was just building and pairing with artists that were on that same level or wavelength that I was on as an artist, and figuring out how can we partner together to build out sort of a local community. So it really started there, networking and figuring out who the key players in the media space, who the key players in the DJ space, bands, artist managers, promoters. It was really a lot of like, all right, who's a key player and how can I invest time, although I may not have the money, how can I invest time in building a relationship and just seeing, how we can build something to help expand, locally. So focusing on your initial target audience is your friends and family. That's the first place you start, and hopefully they become evangelists and that spreads. The collaborations now add new people and you can kind of build from there. But it's really getting to know who the key players are around you and building out those relationships to figure out how you can work together and build together.
I would say, yes, like you said, we're all from Chicago, and we're very blessed that Chicago has a bubbling music scene. Everyone's kind of, you're going to find people that have similar interests, basically. But what I would say is I see the difference in certain artists. For example, if you're just starting out, I would say for sure, be very aware at an early point in your career of who you want to be connected to, like sonically too, like if you want to be attached to a certain movement, study that movement, see who's part of that movement. Because the worst thing that you could do is be attached to something that doesn't really identify with you early on, and then you're kind of stuck. So I would say know that. And then also too, just make sure you're at every open mic. Make sure you're at every, spoken word. If there's something that you're really into, it doesn't matter how little it is, because you never know, something that starts small can get really big. But as long as you connect to it, making sure you're there, making sure your face is known, it's seen, And two, it's really important when you introduce yourself to other people to be very clear as far as what you are and what you do. I've had a few people come up to me and say, I kind of produce, or I kind of sing. It's like, no, when you say you do something, like, make sure you introduce yourself as, I'm a singer, I'm a producer, this is what I do, to make sure you just have that confidence. And yeah, like you said, just study who's doing things that you want to do around you, and then two, don't give up and don't take things personal. A lot of times when you meet people for the first time, you don't know what space they're in, you don't know, what kind of day they've had. So yeah, don't take things personal and just keep going. Keep going to all the events. Eventually when it's your time, it'll stick.
Yeah, Tamika, I would strongly echo one of your points there. Defining yourself. There's, think of it as an elevator pitch. Like you have one chance to make that first impression as an artist, or somebody in the business, regardless if you're an artist or not. And you need to be very clear about communicating what that is. When you introduce yourself to people, whether it's a fan, somebody you're looking to for support in some capacity, you need to be able to express exactly who you are and what direction you're going. I think another thing that you also touched on is your local market. It's so key, regardless of, Billy, you mentioned Boise, Idaho, or Chicago, or wherever it may be. You've got to know what your market is, and you got to know what the opportunities are within that specific marketplace. If you're in Boise and you know that there's a couple of local colleges in the area and there's college radio stations or events that happen on an annual basis, you have to have a handle on that and know the people that are involved with it in some capacity. I think one of the best things you can work on first and foremost is maximizing your hometown. And in order to do that, you have to be intimately familiar with what's going on there. Not saying that you have to be successful in every area there, but you do have to know that you're covering every opportunity in the marketplace in some capacity. And I think that as an artist or as a business, those are two absolutely essential first steps for you.
Right on. Awesome advice just to kick things off. Really appreciate everybody going in deep there. And we're just going to keep it going. Touch a little bit more on the promotional tools and strategies that artists can implement once they do know their market and they have established who they are and how they do that elevator pitch to, whoever they are trying to garner support from. Most aspiring musicians know that having a social media presence obviously can help an artist stay connected to their fans, build upon that fan base, reach new fans. Ryan, I guess I'll just kick it back to you. We can go around the bend again. What are some of the promotional tools that you've been able to use to your advantage as a music manager when building an online or in-person fan base? What are those go-to tools that you would bring to the table for an artist that knows who they are, what they want, but is just starting out with that whole social media game or internet online presence?
Yeah, certainly. I think it's kind of a multi-headed monster. You have to look at, so from a marketing perspective, you have different forms of media within your local marketplace. Hopefully there's some form of college or local radio. Hopefully there's some form of impactful local blog or media outlet. Hopefully there is a different couple levels of venues that you can scale up, from a small coffee house up to a couple hundred cap club up to a theater and thereon. I think that what you need to do in order to best realize all those opportunities is, like I mentioned before, research what the opportunities are. Know how to pitch DJs with a local college radio station or whatever the radio opportunities, if they are available to you, what those are. How to contact blog editors, how to reach out to individuals that are going to help spread your story there. It's essential. And I don't think there's necessarily one tool that is a resource for that. It's being able to mine those opportunities individually on a case-by-case basis. I do think once you get into discussion of some actual promotional resources, an independent artist's best friend can be something like Submit Hub. Not everybody has the opportunity to finance a marketing and press partner. And so from an artist's perspective, you still want to take a shot at finding some significant impact blogs, trying to reach some national editorial outlets but also trying to find some of those secondary and tertiary outlets that are going to be very helpful in continuing to build your story. An outlet like SubmitHub can be very helpful in, you get to set your budget, you get to manage it entirely how you want to. And, you know, success is not guaranteed there by any means. It's not some sort of pay for play type scenario where by throwing $100 at it, you know you're going to get something done. It's only going to be as good as the story you're able to put forth and push to the editors that are on the receiving end of what your pitches are. I do think that, you know, different types of music are going to be handled differently on social media platforms. But I do think one of the key metrics that people do need to religiously pay attention to is engagement rates. It's one thing that from an industry side, people are always going to look at what those metrics are to determine how organic the fan base is, but also how vocal and aggressive the fan base is. So from an artist perspective, it's always key to know that your engagement rates are at the very least growing in the right direction, if not healthy and continuing to be of impact for you as an artist to tell your story. You know, a lot of times you'll look at artists that have thousands or tens of thousands of followers and an engagement rate of 1%, and you can just tell right off the bat that it's simply not something that they're able to leverage for their for their brand to grow. You know, if you have 10,000 followers and 1% of them are engaging with your social media content, it's not, either the followers aren't real for you or the content isn't motivating them to interact. And you've got to figure out which way the pendulum is swinging in that respect, because you need to be able to grow that engagement rate to be able to grow your opportunities. There aren't any specific tools that I can recommend to necessarily manage or leverage that. But I do think that figuring out how you can get a hold of that data or figure out how you can, I guess it's trying to figure out, make sure you have a handle on what that number actually is and figure out how you can best grow that. If it's something that doing live Q&As with your fans or doing live sessions on Instagram or going Facebook Live or continuing to put up new videos on YouTube, however you figure out what is going to help you grow that engagement strategy, that's what you really need to spend some time on in an early stage.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah. Engagement is a huge portion of, you know, what artists need to focus on. R.O.E, Tamika, anything to add there?
Man, he said like everything. I feel like there's, like you said, there's so, and again, it's, everybody is different, right? And so also it's kind of challenging for me. One of my artists is extremely engaged in social media. The other one is not at all. So also too, making sure that what they do is authentic to them. I know Ryan had touched on it too. Your fans can tell what's real and what's not. So you always want to do what's genuine. And even with one of my other artists that I consult for, sometimes she doesn't like to share because she's like, you know, I'm having a bad day. I'm like, well, even share something like that maybe, or maybe open up the Q&As. You know, that thing is like, there's social media, there's so many chances for engagement. So you can see, because some people's fan base, they don't interact with Q&As. Some people interact more in your comment section. So it's playing with your content and making sure that you have that content there that's still true to yourself, to see what people actually connect with, because that's how you can start to really target in on what type of fan base you have too. You know, to really see like what they engage in, what it is that they like. And then from there too, you can kind of see like, okay, well, these fans, if they engage when I post videos, if they engage when I just post, you know, stills, if they, you know, interact with those Q&As. And for me, what I always say in the early stages is I have my clients go through and look for the people who engage the most, like people who are constantly commenting, people who are constantly liking, and just maybe shoot them like a DM privately on the side and just kind of start that relationship early, because your core fan base, those are really going to be the people that advocate for you. They become almost like your family. They feel like they're your family. And those are the people who are going to reshare, who are going to tell their friends, especially when you get into like college markets. That's like the key, because you have people who are going to school in Boise, Idaho, but have friends that are going to school in Florida, you know, so those fan base, if you really connect with those two people at the very beginning, that's something that's very easy. And it doesn't have to be a forced conversation. You know, it can be a, like, thank you for supporting me, and kind of see sometimes like where that conversation even leads to. I always say in the early stages, even when COVID hit and, you know, you couldn't really share as much or we couldn't perform as much, I really urged my clients to engage with those fans that are like their core fans. And it's just interesting to see where it goes from there. And two, it's interesting if, you know, people live in different cities, you know, kind of start to engage with those in those different cities. Targeted ads, of course, is a good one. I don't really look at the top cities for me when I do any campaign ads. I look at the lower cities and I kind of target those, because then I'm interested to see where those numbers grow and how those streams and things like that grow after you focus on those too. A little bit.
Tamika, I think your point on the core fans it is really important. You know, in this day and age, that's what like street teaming used to be, and finding ways to really leverage your super fans it's essential to word of mouth growth. You know, when you find other people to spread the word for you, that's when you really start to see exponential growth. And in some of the comments in the chat, I've seen people talk about collaboration opportunities and ways to involve your fans. I think that's all very true, and that's all there's a lot of great opportunity there. Ways that you can reward your fans for being involved in the process or wanting to be involved in the process. It's a great opportunity to bring sweat equity into the game for your fans. And that's something that as a fan of an artist, you always want to be as close as you can be to the artist, while knowing that you're never going to be the artist themselves. If there's some way that you can let them touch that process, I think that they're going to be forever thankful and very vocal supporters of you moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. I think the biggest thing to think about on social media is like everybody is human. So if you can make yourself as human-like as possible and relatable, because everybody's just like you. So that's the one thing I always tell my clients, like, just be human, because everybody is, and it's going to connect with somebody at some point.
And
I think I got a point.
Yeah.
Like, you guys are spot on. And this is coming from an artist who my team had to pretty much force me to be interactive on social media because it wasn't authentic to me. So I went a step further, and as you can see, I have textaro.com up there, and that's how I directly engage with my audience, my super fans, through text message. It's something that I learned from my mentor, Ryan Leslie, and it's something I've been implementing for the last 5 years of direct engagement. So taking it even further, like, yeah, I'm bringing people to my Instagram page through targeted ads and so forth. People are finding me on Spotify. All of that's great, but I don't own any of that data. So how can I now own something and funneling those super fans, those evangelists to something that's more direct, and being able to hit them on the text and saying like, hey, here's a preview of a new single that I'm dropping. And they go to look at social media and don't see it anywhere. And they're like, oh man, he really texted this to me to say, I want you to listen. So I really think owning your audience, you know, all of those things are key, but figuring out a way to funnel that to something that you own. What back in the day was the email list, and now I think moving to sort of an SMS relationship management tool, I think is going to be key to maintaining those relationships amongst those super fans and keeping them engaged, for sure.
That's so cool that, I mean, everything that Ryan and Tamika brought to the table here, you know, touches on engagement and that genuine interaction that you have with fans. And I think in a world where there are a million ways to engage with your audience or your super fans, and that foundational fan base that, like Tamika said, is your family, they're the people that are going to lift you up and support you through those first few shows to fill those rooms and to get you to where you need to go. And I love, Ro, how you have simplified it and almost pulled it back to where the SMS text message, you know, something that we've all grown up with at this point, is your tool for engaging with that fan base. It's low-key brilliant. Love that. Wanted to jump ahead just because I know, I mean, we could dig into this all day, but want to get to a few other questions before there's time for Q&A. And Tamika, you specifically have been working with an artist called Femdot, who you informed me about their nonprofit, De La Creme Scholars, which they've been working on now amidst the pandemic without the ability to tour like you normally would. And so I'll start by asking you this question and love for anyone else to chime in before we move forward. But how can an artist utilize their local community to build awareness for their work, but also for the other things that they care about within that local community? I know it's mostly about the music, but what are the other ways that you've seen artists access their neighborhoods or communities around them to not only make an impact on those communities, but gain new fans and notoriety through the process?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to the first question that we had about just knowing your community and knowing what's going on, being engaged all the time. I'm very blessed that I have two artists that are just good people, genuinely good people, and want to help. So FEM's nonprofit has been going on for the last 3 years. And when the pandemic hit, we had, canceled festivals, canceled tour dates. I didn't really see this as an opportunity really for this to grow. But then once everything started happening with the riots, the looting, and all the unfortunate circumstances that are going on in everybody's city, that's really where we got extremely active. And just by seeing the need for it. So I think, again, it becomes a matter of knowing that if you're an artist in your community, that you really represent your city, you really represent your community, and it's something that you should, be proud of. So knowing what's going on in that city. My other artist, Shawnee Des, she doesn't have a nonprofit, but she personally enjoys biking. So she, organized a freedom bike ride, and over 400 people showed up. So it's like really knowing what you're interested in, seeing if there's that in the community. Also too, what I always tell artists, if you play the piano, maybe you give, free piano lessons to, children in the neighborhood. Maybe that's a good way. And a lot of times what I find is artists always want to collaborate with my clients, but sometimes it's, they're like, oh, we can go sit in the studio, get to know each other. For me, if an artist were to come to me and say, hey, I want to volunteer at your nonprofit, for a few weekends, can we work together that way? I'm much more open to that and building a relationship through those common interests. So again, that's another good way too, to just build with other artists or build that community to see where that need is. And if you don't see that need is being met, being willing to take that on yourself to see, whatever it is that you didn't have growing up, know that that's kind of your responsibility in a way to provide that for somebody if you know that help is needed. Because then again, too, it's great to have music. Obviously, that's the core goal is music. But if there's other avenues that you can find to help uplift not only you, but that community. And now through the nonprofit, we've raised more money for this nonprofit than we have his entire music career so far. And also, we've gotten so many just opportunities to, with this shows and newsletters and interviews and even brands that I had relationships with before, but now brands that I didn't have relationships with that now want to come forward and want to work with him and want to, help any way that they can. So I'm building my network off of that, which I didn't even really, I knew it would happen, but I didn't think it would be on that scale. So that's really helped. But again, just knowing your community, knowing where the need is, and making sure that you're doing something that resonates with you, though. Again, always being authentic in what it is that you choose to attach yourself with.
Thanks for that, Tamika. That's amazing that you've found such momentum in something completely separate from FemDot's music, but it's also helped so much in the momentum that he'll see moving forward when it is time to go back on tour. Ryan, Ro, anything to add there? Or cool. No pressure.
I think she nailed it. I think she nailed it. Obviously, a pretty unique opportunity for her, but I think that's. I mean, that is hitting it on the head. She really took an opportunity and made the best of it for a personal opportunity with the with the artist. I mean, you can't ask for anything more than having some real personal interest in something that's a little outside of what you are presenting as an artist. It's not about your music necessarily, but it's about something that you are really passionate about, and you want your fans to feel that and also help leverage that. I think it's an amazing way to tie in something outside of just the music business into what you're doing as a creative artist.
For sure.
Cool. Yeah, thanks everybody. I want to get in a few more questions before we get to the Q&A in just about 5 or 10 minutes. But specifically focusing on artists that have began to establish that concrete, family fan base, that local fan base that we've been talking about. They want to further garner industry recognition now. All artists, as they start to grow a fan base and develop their careers, they're interested in building a network that can help them get press, reviews, or other types of industry exposure. A showcase at South by Southwest comes to mind as a really great thing that a lot of artists are looking for that exposure. Any recommendations or things that you've all implemented to help your artists get that next step in their career, like the review that they've been wanting, or the interview, or the showcase that they've been vying for? Is there anything that stands out as like a next step for those that have already started establishing themselves but want to take that a little further?
Yeah, I think there's Ro, go ahead.
Yeah, I think like from an artist perspective, I think it just depends on what your goals are. And I think, we laid this earlier in the conversation, figuring out who you are, what it is you want to accomplish, and then taking those steps to get to those, to those goals. And it's a step-by-step journey. And I think if the next step for you is you want to be featured in, Rolling Stone as an example, like, all right, how do you build to Rolling Stone, right? Like, what's the next step to get to that point? And I think, it goes back to an earlier point of just understanding where you are and where you're looking to go, and taking a realistic look at what it takes to get there. And at my time, it was, I wanted to tour. Like, I love being in front of people. So being in Chicago, what I did was, there's countless cities within a 4 to 5, 6 hour drive from Chicago. So we built a network in Milwaukee, built a network in Madison, Wisconsin, built a network in Detroit, built a network in Grand Rapids. All of these are also college towns. So now we got, that whole Midwest radius. I took the initiative because I knew no one was going to go hard for me like I was going to go for myself, and built a lot of relationships. And then in building those authentic relationships, it wasn't like, hey, let me come play your show. It was like, hey, I respect what you're doing in your city. I would love to offer you an opportunity to come to Chicago and play on, one of my shows. At that time, we were playing at Double Door. Double Door is a 500 cap room in Chicago. You think about a band in Milwaukee that gets to come and play in front of 300-400 people in a city that they're not from, leveraging that show swap and just building those relationships and figuring out, how can I help you? And in return, if you want to help me, that's great. But, I'm trying to figure out how to help that next artist, and it built into something very authentic. So it just really boils down to, what do you want your next step to be? If it is press, all right, how do we get there? It's little steps. It's building a roadmap to get there. It's not, not every artist is going to be able to make that one leap and go right to whatever that ultimate goal is. It's just being realistic and figuring out, all right, how do we build to that point, and being ready to get your hands dirty to get to that process.
Yeah, I would agree with so much of what you said there. The show swap is such a great opportunity that artists need to leverage more and more. One of the things from a live side, Billy, you mentioned when you get your home market in a good place and you're looking to grow from there. I think one of the things as an artist you have to look at is, what are your next 5 target markets for growth, and why are those your next, target markets? Is it Milwaukee and Madison because there's a great young college feel to them and they're going to be aggressive for your type of music? Or should you be going to look at, a Des Moines and a Lincoln, Nebraska for a different rationale? But I think you need to figure out ahead of time what your targets are and have a game plan to how to attack that. On the press side of things, you kind of you could always look at it in a form of reverse engineering a success story. Look at an artist that you want to model yourself after, and look at what their growth trajectory was. How did they get from, a feature in the Daily Magazine and Atwood Magazine all the way up to Lyrical Lemonade 18 months later? You got to figure out what those stepping stones were and make those some very realistic targets for yourself. If you have a full album cycle coming up and you have a couple of songs that you're really hype on, you want to promote those aggressively, figure out what outlets you want to push for, and have some real hard objectives in mind for yourself on the press side of things. You want to get a review on some blog for your first song. You want to get a premiere on some significant internet outlet for your second song. and hope that, you know, you can get an album review on Consequence of Sound, or some outlet that you really feel proud about that has some not local or even regional, but maybe national exposure opportunities. It's not to say that you have to stick to that as a hard and fast way to grow, but reverse engineering can be your friend in so many different areas of the business. You know, find some artists that you really feel that you have comparables for, and look at what their growth trajectories were. What did they see as really significant opportunities that they capitalized on in their past, and how can you try to do the same thing?
For sure. Awesome. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's really the name of the game in terms of the biggest thing that I took away from both of those answers is not even so much, you know, networking for fan base, but also not disregarding the networking opportunities you need to take with other musical acts, because that show swap, that reverse engineering, you know, a lot of that process, knowing the right people will introduce you to that next opportunity for an interview or for a opening slot on a tour, or all of those
Right.
good things that can help build that fan base. In the spirit of just keeping things in time, we've got one more question before we get to some of this Q&A. Thanks to everybody submitting questions, and we'll try to get through as many as we can. But we want to talk about a question that's on a lot of people's minds. A lot of people that are tuning in today submitted questions around this specifically, and it's what we're doing to maintain, engage, and grow a fan base during a pandemic. It's a really difficult time for everybody. And so what I'm wondering is, just based on everything that we've already covered, you know, engaging with your community in new ways and finding those ways to be really genuine through your online interactions, maybe even going offline and taking it straight to a text message or a phone call, in Rose's case, is a great example of getting creative. But despite the clear difficulties of not being able to perform live or tour, is there anything that stands out to you all as you work in the music business to help keep your artist's fan base growing, that you've been able to implement during the pandemic that has stood out to you or made an impact on your fan base? And that goes also for live streaming and virtual events. You know, how have you all been staying creative there and adapting to this new normal that we were talking about a little earlier?
I think a couple of the points that we've brought up hit home on this topic, and they're, I guess they're a little bit you know, buzzy. And you want to be natural and organic. You want it to be something that is heartfelt and really original for the artist. You want to make sure that your fans are actually getting some real value from it. I think we've kind of touched on some of these points throughout the conversation here so far, but I think that it really is magnified in this sense. It's not going to be um, it's not going to be wise to take every single live stream opportunity, because your true fans are going to get tired of seeing the exact same thing over and over again. So make sure that you find the right outlet that really resonates with your identity as an artist and your fan base's identity, and make that just a kick-ass opportunity to showcase what you're really trying to put out there. I think that there certainly is some credence to doing different types of live streaming shows. You could do a cover night, you could do an acoustic night, you could do a fan request live opportunity. But figuring out why your fans want that from you is going to be a very key component of that plan. It's not to say that you should only do one or two things, but you should just make sure that whatever you are doing, do it to the best of your abilities, but also make sure that it's going to be something that your fans are going to be head over heels about. You want to make sure that they're not going to get tired of this and that they're going to tune out after a minute, because that's how you're going to lose fans, is when they start seeing that you're trying to just capitalize on every opportunity and not really caring if it's something that's going to be beneficial for them. You know, I think that there's obviously a lot to unearth in that conversation, and there's so many different ways to take that discussion. But I think at the end of the day, it really is about make sure that you are proud and happy with what you're putting out there. And as a fan of that, you would be thrilled to revisit that time and time again.
Cool.
Yeah, I think again, like you said, we touched a lot on it, but just yeah, being authentic. Like for instance too, it's like it's reading the I gotta say like reading the room. I've had some artists, you know, put out some stuff that it's like, is this really the time for that? So you want to make sure that whatever you put out, you can stand behind. Again, that you have the follow-up content for it, because content and interaction is very different right now. So being very smart about that. I've had to make a lot of adjustments with my artists. There was some stuff that we were going to release. I'm like, now's not the time. We're going to have to wait on that, because even, the follow-up, it wouldn't make sense. But it's been interesting because, for instance, one of them is a singer that I manage, and it's a better climate for her. She's able to sit in a room with a guitar and acoustic set and just sing, and it's very natural, and it's great. Whereas Femdot is a rapper, and not everything that's offered, it makes sense. And so I'm like, okay, this is your time to work on your project, to kind of get some stuff done. And with Shawnee, I can push her in other elements just that it fits. But what's been very interesting is we've gone back and shared, so because we all, I think, have content that we're sitting on that we never released, or maybe some BPS and B-roll, something that we've kind of been holding on to. So I feel like I've learned that the more that we share that, it's pushed the engagement. So during the pandemic, we hit a million streams on something that was old. And it was just from sharing old, BTS, sharing footage from concerts when it was a thing for those. Monthly listeners have gone up significantly just from sharing old stuff. I think kind of the nostalgia that people connected with on that was fitting. And even if you have old music, maybe you never did visuals for that. Maybe there was something you always wanted to kind of do, but you didn't. Now you have time to. So don't feel the pressure that you have to always, make absolutely new things. If there's something that you think connects to the current time right now, even if it's old, and you have some content around that, let that breathe. Let that go. And plus, money is kind of it's an issue for everybody right now. Not everybody's making money right now. So if you have that, you're sitting on it, you don't have the money to make anything new, you got to be resourceful right now.
Cool. I love that thought of, before we get into the Q&A here really quick, I think so many people during this time are panicking and thinking, what new things do I have to release? Oh God, I've got to work on this new project. I've got to get this project out. I've got to live stream every day. I've got to put all this out. Doing an inventory on your back catalog, or the things that you've had lingering on SoundCloud that no one knows about, or old videos that you've never released, taking an opportunity to reintroduce those to your existing and potential new fan base. Now is a great time to do that. I love that thought there, Tamika. So thanks everybody for sharing, and going to dive right into a few of these questions. Keep in mind, we got a lot of questions. So if we want to do some quick lightning round Q&A right now, I'm down if you guys are. So feel free. Yeah, I'm just going to dive right in. And Allison has a great question here. How do y'all feel about press kits or EPKs? Are they still necessary? She herself has never had one or had anyone ask for one, but she still feels like she should create one. So how do you feel in regard to all artists needing press kits?
At least the one.
There's a time and a place.
Yeah.
I love it. Yes.
Yeah. At least the one sheet. As your career grows, you'll realize at least having a one sheet, it just makes shit so much simpler, because people will ask you for a million things. You just send over at least your one sheet. Everything's there that they need, your bio, all the press links, the videos, update it regularly. I don't think you have to go OD on an EPK. I've come to realize a lot of huge artists don't have one. I was doing some stuff with Xavier Omar's manager, and I asked for their one sheet for something we were doing, and he's like, we've never had to make one. So I think everybody's different. Everybody's completely different. So.
And if you don't have the right content for it, don't fake it.
Exactly, because it'll definitely show.
It's like padding a resume at this point.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah.
We've got a topic, actually, just doing a quick shameless self-promotion plug, maybe not self-promotion, but Sofar promotion plug, because we're getting a lot of questions about college radio. Ryan had brought up, and we've been talking a lot about how college markets can be key to establishing a fan base for growing musicians. Quick plug, if you haven't already, we have a wonderful in-session planned for next month, September 24th. We're actually going in deep on radio play, how independent artists can use radio play, college radio, all of that good stuff to their advantage. An incredible lineup of panelists just like today. But I'm going to ask this quick question now that everybody knows to sign up for the radio play in session in a few weeks. Do you all think that sending an email or an EPK is enough to engage with a local radio station or college radio to get your music out there? Or is there another way of really getting yourself known or really standing out to DJs or curators that might be considering a lot of submissions at once for a college radio station?
I think a lot of, well, I would hope, I know that some do, and I hope more would, DJs or stations put information on their website or on their socials about best practices. Some people want you to specifically highlight a track or a reason that they should pay attention to it. Others want you to send them a physical CD and just let them live with the music so they can experience it independent of your agenda. I think that, doing a quick canvas of the socials and website of the outlet can give you a lot of help and information in that submission process. Don't be afraid to be very direct about what you're angling for. If you have one song that you want them to pay attention to, send them the one song. Don't give them a whole album. If there's a show coming up, if there's some recent press, if there's any notable stats that you can point to, do it. You want to make this as easy and convenient for them to see and realize the story that you're trying to tell them. So figure out how you want to pitch yourself, make it very quick and concise, and don't be afraid to follow up. These people are inundated with requests and submissions, obviously not as heavy as something like a Spotify editor, which is getting 50,000 new tracks a day. But, if you have a local, KCRW in LA, you got 5 different DJs there that all have new music shows. They're probably getting a good 40, 50 new songs or projects on a weekly basis. Don't be afraid to follow up and just check in with them. Hey, did you hear my track? What do you think? They're going to be more likely than not, they're going to be honest with you. If it's not for them, don't take it personally. That's just their agenda. They're not saying you're a shitty musician. They're just saying it's not right for what they do. So take that in stride, find the next opportunity to either pitch them something different or a different outlet to pitch what you're working on. And just stay confident that you and your data the right pitch is going to be the best way to go about submitting it to all the different outlets.
Right on.
The follow up. That's key. And this is coming from an artist. The follow up is so key because I've seen more yeses in the follow up than I've seen in the initial outreach. Because to that point, they're being bombarded by stuff. So it's like, if you take the initiative to follow up, they see how serious you are, and they're likely to, maybe they did miss it. And now that you followed up, it's now top of mind. They give it a quick listen, and maybe it's a quick yes, it's a quick no, whatever it is, you get a response and you can kind of move from there. But, without the follow up, you never really know because, again, there's so much happening, especially now. People have their platforms and the things that they're thinking of, but, there's so much insecurity that people have to worry about that, that thing isn't always top of mind, and that quick reminder will definitely help.
For sure. And in that same regard, do you think that a lot of the things that we've already been talking about and establishing have come back, which I think is the key to, having a solid panel is that's the result, is we're going to be reiterating a lot of the same things because it really is fairly simple at the end of the day, what you need to focus on when you're thinking about building that fan base or engaging with all of these different outlets. But similarly to the college radio question, what about engaging with your local government for tourism or the Visitors Bureau? If, for example, you're trying to break into that community, do you think the knowing what you are, what you're trying to pitch, sending out that quick, clear, concise communication and doing the follow-ups necessary to really get their attention is the way to go? Or is there anything different when you're trying to connect to your community or your government as opposed to a local college radio station, for example?
It's a great question. I think that knowing exactly what you want out of them is going to be key to that pitch process. If you're looking for, hey, I'd like to get a permit to have a free show in the municipal park downtown, knowing how to go about that and contact the right person is going to be very key to that process. If you're just trying to pitch, if you're pitching the wrong person for the wrong thing, I don't think it's going to get you anywhere. So I guess it goes back to some of the topics we hit here. Do your research, know what you're trying to accomplish and who you're trying to reach first. I do think that obviously different cities are going to have different levels of engagement opportunities. A smaller, if you're in a college market, you're probably going to have a better success rate than in a city that doesn't have a lot of college engagement and is not necessarily a hotbed for 18 to 25-year-olds. But if you're in a city like New York or LA or Chicago, I mean, that's a whole different beast. Trying to navigate that kind of metro system for whatever you're trying to accomplish, whether it's, grants or permits. I mean, they have departments that are specifically relegated to handling that. So hopefully it's going to be a bit more of a streamlined process. But if you're an early stage artist, you're going to be pretty low on their totem pole of who they're looking to appease in the process. So I realize it's not really a concise or direct answer, but I think that going back to the idea of know what you're trying to accomplish and make sure you know you're reaching the right people is going to be the most effective way to move forward on that.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Anything for Tamika, you or R.O.E to add real quick? I know that, again, is a bit of we could probably spend a lot more time talking about that particular question, but I figured I'd check in with y'all.
Spot on.
Yeah, I just say too, don't get discouraged. You gotta stay, persistent. And throughout everything in music, it's just like you can't take anything personal, and don't get discouraged. Whatever doesn't work for you, you don't know. It might not work this year. It could hit in 2 years. You don't know. So just, don't give up, and whatever you do, even sometimes, if people say no, sometimes I just ask, like, can you let me know what I'm missing? Could you let me know what you need to see different, to kind of take that constructive criticism? And I've even applied that if it's not for that specific circumstance, for something different. So now I'm like, okay, now I know how to approach this. Now I know what they're looking for.
Yeah. And so I think just to sum it up really quickly, everything that I've been able to take away is being your genuine self and understanding for what that means to you first, before you share it with the world, is one of the most important things that you can do as an artist. And then in that same vein, if you recognize who you are, what you're trying to accomplish, and what you're bringing to the musical world, then there's no shame in other people not necessarily vibing with that, not necessarily agreeing that they want to, play your music on the radio station or host your show or whatever happens. Like, that's the way of the music industry. And again, even though it's a really personal thing to write down your feelings or your thoughts or whatever it is that's going on inside of you and put that down on paper or create an instrumental that represents that can be a very personal thing. But the most important thing to recognize is that, like, persistence is key. You might, or guaranteed will, hear the word no a lot. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's what every musician at some point in their career goes through when trying to establish and build a fan base. So correct me if I'm wrong, but that was my biggest takeaway from today. And I just appreciate you all so much for sharing your time and your energy and your experience with us this afternoon. It's really meant a lot to us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
and it was a pleasure being on this panel with some great minds, for sure.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to everybody who's on. There's people from all over. So thank you guys for taking the time. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah. Thanks again, everybody. We've got a really great in-session planned next week that goes into a little bit of what we've been focused on, but we're hyper-focusing on social media campaigns. So we're going to have some guests from everywhere from Instagram to, local social media proprietors that are going to talk to us more in detail about what it takes to build that social media campaign for your next tour or show or album or whatever it is that you're working on. So please feel free to sign up for that and check out the rest of the in-session topics that we've got coming up for the rest of the quarter. But again, my name is Billy. I want to give a huge thank you to Tamika, Ryan, and R.O.E for your time. And we will be recording this conversation and sharing it early next week for everybody who had to dip early or wasn't able to make it today. So look out for that email, and then please just do your best to keep up with what these three, as well as everybody else in the Sofar world, is going on with or have coming up. A lot of really interesting, great projects coming out that all three of these individuals here on the panel have a lot of hand in working on. So keep up, and we'll share more information on how you can follow along with the projects that they're focused on. But thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
bye, guys.
See y'all.
Thank you.